Firefighters Union urges PM to cancel Trump visit. The Firefighters Union called on Sir Keir Starmer to cancel Donald Trump's upcoming state visit, warning it could stretch a service already under pressure. The Fire Brigades Union, FBU, says crews are being asked to provide extra fire cover at Chequers, the Prime Minister's country residence in Buckinghamshire, where the U.S. President is expected to meet Sir Keir on the 18th of September. The FBU says Buckinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service admitted staffing elsewhere in the county may be compromised to accommodate it. Buckinghamshire Fire Service declined to comment. A government spokesperson says, "We have no plans to cancel the state visit." The FBU said fire and rescue services were facing substantial cuts locally and across England. Steve Wright, the union's general secretary, says he believes lives may be put at risk. Fire service staff in Buckinghamshire had been offered overtime pay for the state visit, the FBU added. The union warned that fire engines sent to Chequers would have the recommended 5 firefighters, while local residents would only get crews of 4. Chris Wycherley, FBU Executive Council member for the Southern Region, said the service had been on its knees due to 15 years of cuts. Buckinghamshire has spent all summer suffering a lack of resources. "We have had wildfires, hot temperatures and low rainfall," said Mr. Wycherley. He said the public would see the deployment as a cruel joke, adding that the fire service exists to save lives, not to put on a show for far-right foreign leaders. The FBU says 1 in 5 firefighter jobs have been lost in the UK since 2010, with response times now 3 minutes slower than in the 1990s. It says climate change is increasing the strain on services. The Prime Minister used his trip to the White House earlier this year to extend an invitation from King Charles III for the U.S. President's second state visit. A spokesperson for the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government said, "To keep the public safe, we've given fire and rescue authorities almost £3 billion in the last financial year to support their vital and life-saving work." Drones to police from the skies during Trump visit. Drones used in a major policing operation during Donald Trump's second state visit to the UK will act as an eye in the sky around Windsor Castle, police have said. King Charles III and Queen Camilla are hosting the president and his wife, First Lady Melania Trump, between 17 and the 19th of September. A temporary order will restrict Windsor airspace from when the state visit rehearsal takes place on the 16th of September until the 18th of September. "It's a significant policing operation for us," INSP Matthew Wilkinson, Airspace Bronze Commander for Thames Valley Police, said. Speaking on Monday during a demonstration of the DJI M30T model drone at the Forces Training Center in Sulamstead, Berkshire, he said, "We have a good history of putting on these events for both the royal family and the country." When asked about the scale of the drone operation compared to other high-profile events, he replied, "It's one of the larger ones. It's in line with other large-scale events we've put on as a force. Obviously every event carries its own challenges and threats, and we'll assess that and resource it accordingly." Airspace restrictions mean non-police drones and smaller aircraft will not be allowed to fly through the protected area, but INSP Wilkinson said the public would be kept informed. "We are engaging with the local businesses, local communities, hobbyist drone enthusiasts, gliding schools and things like that, to try and share that message, so it's not a surprise for anybody," he said. "Obviously it's an offense to fly a drone in a restricted airspace and we will have resources to deal with any of those incursions." He added, "We will have plenty of capability in the sky when the time is appropriate." The drones are already used by police on a day-to-day basis, as part of missing persons inquiries and drug warrants. Each one can fly up to 120 meters, 400 feet, and stay up for 30 minutes at a time, with a replacement drone taking off shortly before the end of that period. Windsor was chosen for the U.S. President's state visit as the typical venue. Buckingham Palace continues to undergo renovations. Trump was hosted by Queen Elizabeth II for his first state visit in 2019 during his first term in office. Traditionally, second-term presidents are not offered a state visit, but Trump's arrival is expected to be greeted with a full ceremonial welcome and a state banquet in St. George's Hall. John Swinney visits U.S. for Scotch whiskey talks. First Minister John Swinney has flown to the United States to make a fresh appeal for better trade terms for Scotch whiskey. U.S. President Donald Trump has imposed a 10% tax, known as a tariff, on whiskey and most other UK goods when they enter the U.S. market. The Scotch Whisky Association, SWA, has argued for an exemption or a relaxation of the rules for the lucrative export, a call supported by the Scottish and UK governments. Swinney is staying with UK Ambassador Lord Mandelson in Washington, D.C. The First Minister's spokesman refused to comment on whether Swinney was comfortable staying with Mandelson in light of reports about his friendship with convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. The spokesman also declined to comment on whether the First Minister would raise the Epstein issue with Mandelson at a scheduled breakfast meeting. Mandelson, a former Labour minister, has said he regrets ever meeting Epstein. Swinney's trip to the U.S. is his second this year. In April, he visited New York during the annual Tartan Week celebrations. Trump is due to visit the UK this month for a state visit, following a 4-day trip to his Scottish golf resorts in July. The First Minister said he raised the issue of whiskey tariffs directly with Trump, whose mother was born on the Isle of Lewis, when they met in Aberdeenshire. On the plane that took him back to the U.S., the president seemed to play down the extent of their conversation. However, Swinney believes the U.S. administration is open to further discussion and he is seeking to press the case before Trump's second state visit to the UK, from 17 to the 19th of September. The Scottish government has arranged a series of meetings for the First Minister in and around Washington, D.C. It is not clear whether he will have a further talks with the president, and he is not expected to agree a deal during the 2-day visit. The SWA, which is working with the equivalent trade body in the U.S., has said that about a fifth of all Scotch whisky is exported to the U.S. The body said that market was worth £971 million in 2024, with the tariffs costing the industry £4 million a week. Scottish External Affairs Secretary Angus Robertson said he could not comment on whether the First Minister would meet Trump. However, he told BBC Radio's Good Morning Scotland that Swinney would meet people that were intimately involved in setting tariff rates, as well as the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States. Robertson said that there was an appetite in Washington to discuss an exemption for whiskey because of its inextricable links with the U.S. bourbon sector, with Scotch typically aged in used bourbon casks. Making tariff decisions that would impact negatively on bourbon will impact negatively on Scotch, and it doesn't need to be that way, he told the program. So that's why Scotland's First Minister is, I think all reasonable people would expect, pressing the case for one of Scotland's most important industries. SWA Director Graham Littlejohn that over the duration of Trump's second term in office, $1.2 billion, £0.88 billion, of old bourbon casks were expected to be sent to Scotland from the US for maturation of Scotch. We're seeing less Scotch whisky going into the market and we're seeing damage done to the industry, he told Good Morning Scotland. That means less trade to not only those cask manufacturers, those cooperages, but also to wholesale distribution and hospitality across the United States. Getting the tariffs back down to zero for Scotch whisky would obviously benefit Scotland and the industry directly, but it would also be a good thing for the U.S. industry and for the U.S. economy. In 2019, during Trump's first presidency, the U.S. imposed a 25% tariff on single malt Scotch whisky exports. That stemmed from a dispute between the U.S. and the EU over subsidies given to rival airplane manufacturers Airbus and Boeing. The UK was tangled up in the row as a former EU member. Those trade barriers were estimated to have cost the Scotch industry more than £600 million in exports before they were suspended for 5 years in 2021. That agreement is due to expire in June 2026, with the SWA calling for the dispute to be permanently resolved to ensure the higher rate is not reimposed.